Good afternoon. Welcome to Grade 12 English First Additional Language. Today we're going to start with the first poetry lesson. The poem we're going to do today is called Death. I would recommend that you sit with your poem and your notes, that you can highlight and add notes while I am explaining. It's a beautiful day to learn something new, so here we go. Right, if we look at the type of poem, it is a ballad. Now, a ballad is often a slow, sentimental or romantic song. And important, a ballad usually tells a story which teaches us a lesson, and they often have a surprise conclusion. Now, ballads were not originally recorded in writing, but rather preserved orally for generations, passed along through narration. Thus, many ballads are anonymous, as this one is, and it was anonymous as the storytellers lost track of who originally told or created the story. If we look at the themes, the first one, very important, is about the inevitability of death, meaning that death is inescapable. Once we are born, we enter death's realm. So now you will see that the word death is used as a refrain in the last line of stanzas 2 to 5. And this emphasizes the theme of the poem that we cannot escape death. The next theme is the irrational fear of death or dying. Fear because it's unknown. Fear because you don't know what will happen, when it will happen, and how it will happen. Throughout this poem, you will see this is a very real fear for the speaker. The tone. Now, the tone of the speaker changes as the poem progresses. In stanza 1, the tone is slightly depressed. His spirit is weighed down by his irrational fear of dying. In stanza 2 to 4, a tone of disbelief and uncertainty becomes evident. And now this is followed by a growing desperation as he tries to escape death. In the last line of the poem, the tone changes to one of resignation. He realizes and acknowledges that it is impossible to escape death. If we have a look at the background of the poem, it was originally a Welsh ballad meant to be sung. And what is important here is it often deals with themes of death and doom. We're going to read through the poem and discuss a few issues more, and then do the poem line for line, line by line. Death. One night, as I lay on my bed, and sleep on fleeting foot had fled, because no doubt my mind was heavy with concern for my last journey. I got me up and called for water that I might wash and so feel better. But before I wet my eyes so dim, there was death on the bowl's rim. I went to church that I might pray, thinking sure he'd keep away. But before I got onto my feet, there sat death upon my seat. To my chamber then I hied, thinking sure he'd keep outside. But though I firmly locked the door, death came from underneath the floor. Then to sea I rowed a boat, thinking surely death can't float. But before I reached the deep, death was captain of the ship. Now again, I want to emphasize and repeat the phrase thinking sure. It's supposed to be surely. It's repeated 3 times. The focus on the word thinking emphasizes that he is unable to control his thoughts of death or dying. Now, this is in stanza 3, 4, and 5. Again, if you look at the word death, it is used as a refrain in the last line of stanzas 2 to 5. Again, this emphasizes the theme of the poem. We cannot escape death. The mood throughout this poem is one of despair and hopelessness and misery. Let's have a look at the title, Death. So the subject matter of the poem is indeed an almost humorous story about the inevitability of death. Why must we know anything about the title? Because the question in the exam paper will ask, do you think the title is appropriate for this poem? So in this poem, it deals with a topic that sometimes makes people feel uncomfortable, namely death. In the first stanza, the speaker describes how one night he cannot fall asleep because he lies thinking about death or dying. Now he's probably troubled, sick, or even old because he's constantly thinking about his oncoming death. And he tries all means possible to avoid thinking about death, but he fails. Death seems to outwit him every time. It seems to know what his next move will be. And then at the end of the poem, eventually, he admits that there's no way to escape death. He will have to accept it. If we start with stanza 1. In stanza 1, the speaker is at home, in bed, but he finds it difficult to fall asleep because he's thinking about his own death. The speaker may be old, as I said, since some older people tend to think a lot about how their lives will end. It is, however, not a given. There may be a different reason for his fear of death. He may be sick or simply obsessed with his imminent or impending death. He may still have unfinished business, feeling that he's not ready to die. Nevertheless, it seems that the thoughts about death torment the speaker continuously. In line 1, one night as I lay on my bed. Now, normally laying on one's bed at night is associated with rest and tranquility and sleep. Night is also associated with darkness and death. So at night, our deepest fears surface. Things always seem scarier or more threatening at night. He uses the word one night. The word one implies that he's going to relate the events of one specific night. However, we get the idea that this is a nightly or reoccurring event. One night may also represent many similar nights spent by the speaker. And this can possibly be one of the reasons for the dim eyes later in the poem. He is very tired because of the lack of sleep. Line 2. And sleep on fleeting foot had fled. Now look at the alliteration of the F. Fleeting foot had fled. The soft F sound emphasizes how softly, secretively, and quickly sleep disappears or runs away. It also links the three words fleeting, foot, and fled, and thereby it emphasizes the speed at which it happens. Fleeting means moving at a great speed or quickly or fast. The word fled is the past tense of flee, is to run away and escape. Look at the personification. Sleep is described as a person who runs away from the speaker. Sleep seems to elude him, like a person who is quickly running away on foot. His fear of death has rendered him unable to sleep. He is desperately and in vain trying to sleep. Line 3. Because no doubt my mind was heavy. No doubt means surely, without a doubt. So he is completely certain. The speaker knows the reason for his sleeplessness. That is why he's using the word because. My mind was heavy. His mind is preoccupied or deeply troubled by his fear of dying. He's consumed by the fear of dying, meaning he is constantly thinking about his death. Line 4. With concern for my last journey. Now the words with concern expresses his worry or his doubt, distress or anxiety. Look at the metaphor of the words last journey. Death is described as the final journey of man's life. The words last journey is also a euphemism. Death is described as less intense or threatening. It is referred to as a pleasurable or enjoyable trip. Take note, it is his constant thinking about death and his overactive imagination that make him visualize death in a variety of unexpected situations. In stanza 2, as a result of his inability to sleep, he decides to get up to wash his face in order to drive away the negative thoughts. This attempt fails completely. As he bends down to wash his face in a bowl of water, he imagines seeing a visible image of death sitting on the rim of the bowl. In line 5, I got me up and called for water. So the speaker finally gives up trying to sleep. He decides to get up and calls on someone to bring water to his room so that he can wash his face, that I might wash and so feel better. So he expects a positive outcome. He hopes that washing his face with cold water will not only refresh him, but also soothe his troubled mind and energize or rejuvenate him. So he's expecting a positive outcome and so feel better. Line 7, but before I wet my eyes so dim. Now look at the antithesis of but. He does not feel better. The imagined appearance of death adds to his worries. Death appears even before he can start washing his face. So as he is bending down to wash his face in a bowl of water, he imagines seeing death sitting on the edge of his washing basin. This emphasizes his constant thinking about death. Now the word dim is not able to see clearly. The words eyes so dim. There are at least 3 possible reasons for this. He can either be still very tired because of a lack of sleep. He is worried and scared of dying. And it might also indicate his age. He's probably old or close to death. His eyes might also be blurred by tears because of his fear and sadness. Line 8, there was death on the bowl's rim. First of all, look at the personification. Death is personified as a person who is everywhere the speaker turns. It acts like a stalker almost, that follows him relentlessly. The word rim is the outer edge of something circular. He constantly thinks about death. His troubled mind and overactive imagination make him visualize death on the edge of the basin he is about to use to wash his face. This sight will surely defeat the purpose of washing your face, which is an effort to make you feel better or refreshed. So the speaker's fear of dying is so intense that he cannot escape from death, or for that matter, escape from thinking about death. Stanza 3. Now, what just happened drives him to church to pray, and he is certain that this will take his mind off thoughts of death. However, he has barely finished praying when he realizes that death is sitting in his seat. So in line 9, I went to church that I might pray. Now the appalling sight of death sitting on the rim of his washing bowl drives him to church to pray. He is convinced that this will take his mind off thoughts of death. Remember, most people tend to turn to God if everything else has failed, and now he sets off to church as he is sure that he will find relief there. I went to church that I might pray. The word pray refers to communication with God. So he hopes to get God's help to ward off death or to stop himself from thinking about death constantly. So he's not there to confess or to praise the Lord. He is currently solely focused on his own protection or safeguarding. The word church, a church is regarded as a place of safety. It provides protection, and it is there where the speaker thinks that God will protect him from death. Line 10. Thinking sure he'd keep away. Now he wants to pray for relief from his concern, and he firmly believes that death will not enter the church. He believes he will be safe and protected in church, as it is believed to be a place of safety, a sanctuary. The word sure is an example of elision. It means surely, meaning that he is very confident that death would not dare follow him into church. He hopes that it will respect the sanctuary of the church. He is confident that death will not follow him into church, and ironically, it is, however, not what happens. He cannot escape from death or stop thinking about death. Line 11, but before I got onto my feet. So he kneels down to earnestly beg for God's protection. But he was barely finished praying when he realizes that death is sitting in his seat. So the fact that he's kneeling down to pray, going down on one's knees when one prays, indicates great respect and sincerity. It may refer to an intense pleading. He goes on in line 12, there sat death upon my seat. So the personification, so as the narrator finishes his prayer, he finds death waiting for him in the seat that he has left vacant when he kneeled down to pray. So the speaker is comparing death to a person who has rudely and disrespectfully taken over his seat in church. Death still seemed to follow the speaker everywhere, again like a stalker would. He sat upon my seat. So this literally means that to him it feels as if death is a person following him around, and he even has the audacity to sit on his seat in church. Figuratively, the speaker means that he cannot escape the thoughts of death, not even while in church. Stanza 4. Now the speaker was alarmed by the sight of death sitting in his seat in church, and now he hurries home and he locks himself in his bedroom. But this does not help either. Death enters the room through the floorboards. Line 13. To my chamber, then I hide. Now, the word chamber refers to your bedroom, and that is a place where one normally feels safe and where you are able to relax and recover. Now, the speaker hopes to escape death in the privacy of his bedroom. However, it's not a very clever move, as it is exactly where he saw death in the first place, in his bedroom, on the bowl's rim. The word hide refers to the past tense form of the old-fashioned word hie, which means to hurry or to go quickly. So this word indicates a sense of desperation or urgency. The tone in this line is one of anxiety, intense fear, and desperation. Line 14. Thinking, sure, he'd keep outside. Now this is the second repetition of surely. Remember, it means certainly. It serves to emphasize his conviction that he has at last found the perfect hiding place. It is a way to escape death or thinking about death. He thinks that death will respect the privacy of his own bedroom. It will not come into his room uninvited. Line 15. But though I firmly locked the door. He even goes as far as locking himself inside the room, making sure death is locked out. But the word but indicates that although he has taken all the necessary precautions to avoid thinking about death, he is still outwitted by death. The word firmly means to securely fix in place, to tighten or to strengthen something. The speaker wants to ensure that death remains outside. Again, ironically, despite all his precautions of locking the doors, death still enters from under the floor. The verb locked means to shut a place by means of a lock, as for security. It just shows us he does everything in his power to keep death out. Line 16. Death came from underneath the floor. So to his dismay, death still finds a way to come inside. He still cannot escape death. It seems to be one step ahead of him all the time. It will use the most unlikely entrance through the floor. So that means he still cannot stop thinking about death. One cannot escape death. It is a vital part of life itself. The moment one is born, you enter the realm of death. So the speaker therefore cannot escape death, and neither can he keep his mind from wandering off to thoughts about when and how he will die one day. In stanza 5, finally in desperation, the speaker, all by himself, alone, rows a boat out to sea to escape death. He fails yet again. Death ends up taking over control of his boat. Line 17. Then to sea I rowed a boat. So finally, the speaker, in desperation, rows out to sea only for death to take control of his boat. He uses the word then. This is yet another attempt to escape death. There's no place on land where death has not found him. Now, therefore, he tries the open waters. His last attempt to escape death is to go out onto the sea in a boat. He believes that death cannot stay above water and it will therefore not be able to follow him. So he believes that death will not be able to find him if he is far out at sea. Thinking, surely death can't float. Again, the repetition of surely, line 10, 14, and 18. The speaker has found another possible escape route that he believes will definitely keep him safe from death. He tries to reassure himself that he is in control. But you will see at the end of the poem, he has to admit he cannot flee from death. Death is everywhere and he can die at any time. Line 19. But before I reached the deep. This is the fourth repetition of the word but. The use of the be alliteration, but before, indicates that he does not get what he has expected. It emphasizes the impossibility of escaping death or thinking about it. So he does not get very far out into the sea before he suddenly comes to the realization that he cannot escape death. The words the deep is an example of metonymy. Here it means out into the open waters of the sea. So the deep refers to the open waters of the sea. Line 20. Death was captain of the ship. So captain refers to the master or the commander of a boat or a ship. There is no hiding from death and he cannot stop thinking about death. Now metaphorically, it is death that will decide when it is time for the speaker to die. He, the speaker, has no choice in the matter. Look at the personification. Death is compared to a captain of a ship taking charge of the narrator's life. The captain of the ship has full control and his orders are to be followed. Death is personified as a person who follows the speaker everywhere, and the subject of death is always on the speaker's mind. It is death who will decide when it is time for the speaker to die. The speaker has absolutely no say in the matter. The metaphor of the ship, The ship refers to the speaker's life journey as well as his final journey, which is death itself. The implication is that death is in complete control of his life. It is impossible to avoid it or hide from it. Death seems to know his moves in advance and keeps outsmarting him. And now he makes peace with the fact that he cannot run away from death and that it cannot be avoided. Neither can he escape the thoughts of death. So remember, death is personified throughout the poem, as death appears to follow the speaker everywhere, and the subject of death is always on his mind. First of all, death appears on the edge of the basin. Death sits on his seat in church. Death creeps into his room from underneath the floor. Death follows him out to sea. Death is the captain of the ship. And remember, the captain is the master and the commander, meaning there's no hiding, there's no getting away. The captain, which is the commander, which is death, will decide when it is time for the speaker to die, and the speaker has no choice in the matter. The message of the poem: man should not worry about dying or try to avoid it, but rather concentrate on living life to the full and enjoying every moment. This concludes the lesson of the poem Death. I sincerely hope that all of you enjoyed it as much as I did. Have a wonderful afternoon and make wise choices. Goodbye.